Hello, everyone. This is Danielle Grant from Leadershape Global. Thank you for being with us today. And joining me today is Karen Dean. Karen is a master certified coach who has been working with executives for 30 years. She's worked in over 100 organizations worldwide. She co-authored a book called Coaching Stories, Flowing and Falling of Being a Coach, with her colleague Sam Humphrey. This book was designed to help coaches navigate the journey from novice to master, celebrating what worked well and openly sharing their epic failures to encourage coaches to learn from their challenges. She won the Best Feature Article Award from Coaching at Work magazine and was also shortlisted subsequently in the same category. Karen is an original thinker and innovator who recently launched Me, My Team. This is an online resource for team leaders and their teams to prepare for and conduct inclusive conversations. They self-sufficiently engage together to thrive and excel without frustration and disappointment. It enables a broad population and organization to consistently approach change with common language and understanding. Karen values generosity, humility, courage, and compassion. Today, we're speaking about how the art of storytelling can create the conditions for a leader to enable their organization to be healthy, happy, successful, inclusive, agile, and sustainable. And that's quite a list of things to achieve. In short, this is a skill that any leader can develop to inspire those around them and to model leading beyond their ego. Karen, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here. Look forward to exploring with you today narrative and storytelling.
That's fab. So my first question, Karen, is what has narrative and storytelling got to do with leadership?
A leader is there to lead people and be there for people. And so connection is absolutely important. And for people to understand, who is this leader? What are they trying to do? How can this be inspiring? What are their values? What are their vulnerabilities? Am I going to connect with them? What does it mean for me? I think is fundamental. And somehow a leader has to create that narrative, to offer their story, and to give people space to test it, believe in it, buy into it, or reject it. I think something that holds with me is for a charismatic storyteller that really helps others believe in them and where they're going. And an inspiring storyteller enables an individual to believe in themselves.
And so for me, that word authentic and real and making people understand the human being is key to that, because it resonates so strongly with the idea that leadership promote of people leading beyond their own egos and really in the interests of their teams and the other stakeholders for their organizations. So what makes storytelling so important in that?
I think it creates the conditions for people to feel part of something and something they can recognize and share their own story about. And if the behaviors that the leader is offering matches the story, then that potentially is going to inspire. I remember observing a leader talking about a big pitch they were doing, offering a service, and those who were looking to hire that service came into their offices. And the day before, they'd had a rehearsal. And the leader saw dead plants, dry soil, really uninspiring. And she was deeply shocked. Is this what we stand for? She said to her people. Where are the green shoots of something that's going to thrive? And she invited them to think about, what's that actually going to say? And on the day of the pitch, the fresh plants were there and they'd filled their atrium with all of the prospective client's brand. But I was so inspired when she shared the story with 150 of her leaders as to what had happened and how she'd responded. They understood in a moment from that metaphor and the symbolism behind it.
the stories and images reach our emotional centers and not just our rational centers. So what's the relationship there between stories and the culture of the organization? I think maybe you've given us some hints, but perhaps you could expand on that a little.
No, certainly. People are communicating all the time and they're sharing stories. And if they don't have a story that is capturing their imagination, then they'll start to talk about the rumors or the resentments that they're feeling, rather than the excitement and the optimism of what's possible. And I know I was an executive coach on a cruise ship for 8 years. So it meant I was away at sea 80 days a year. And in working with over 750 people, I was able to observe that culture. And I remember when a captain changed command and the second captain came on board, it was incredible how the whole atmosphere on the ship changed. Everyone could tell stories about the one who had a really deep, sonorous voice, never engaging, always as if it was going to be horribly bad news, never used people's names, didn't say good morning. And yet, the moment that the other captain came up, then he was telling stories, he was laughing, he was engaging in his broadcasts, he was stopping and speaking to the crew, he was touching their arms, shaking their hands, looking in their eyes. And the atmosphere for the passengers was totally different. I certainly know which one I would have liked to have bought my cruise from. So what the leader is saying is paying attention to and is unfolding in their way of being, and how that becomes a story for everyone in the culture is absolutely fundamental.
That's a lovely story in itself, Karen. So how can you use storytelling to create the conditions for change?
Um, I think metaphors are a really important part of this. Um, People need to be able to acknowledge what they've just been through. They need to find a way of telling the story of that so they can make sense of what was and what's happening now, and then pivot and choose the future together. And if the leadership are inviting people to forget about what was and just go for the change, let's accelerate, let's not be negative, let's have a bright new future, it's really not going to work. And I remember working with a particular team, and we were exploring metaphor. And what was the story of the 2 years they just lived through? And they came up with a Snakes and Ladders children's board game, and were able to describe the time when they were throwing the dice and they had no idea what was happening. And then they were up the ladder, and then they were falling down the snake. And however we do it, whether it's uh, the story of a race course and really challenging jumps and falls, or whatever a team senses, they can use that to acknowledge the past and then move forward together. Most importantly, in those conditions for change, there also has to be the narrative about the inspiring, compelling, attractive, inclusive, healthy, rewarding place to be.
I can see how compelling that can be. And so why does it create such engagement? I mean, you said, one of these captains on the ship was quite sonorous and didn't really engage in eye contact and certainly not in physical contact. So the story seems to be part of a continuum. And I wonder what it is about the stories element in particular that creates the engagement.
Every experience we have, we're going to receive it through our 5 senses. So we need to see it, hear it, feel it, taste or smell it. And then we create an internal representation of what's going on. And that forms the fundamentals of the story. In business, very often we use a lot of digital language. We're going to develop a program to organize our people for the technological advantage of our digital solution. How can you create a picture of that? And therefore, for stories to be engaging, it has to be sensory. And in inviting our senses to connect and have that internal image, sound, feeling, taste, or smell, we engage a part of our brain that is future orientated, that can release oxytocin, that brings the bond of connecting with others. And if as a leader, you can create oxytocin flowing in your people and they are bonded to your story, that's incredibly powerful. May I just give an example? In the book that we wrote, I was thinking about a young man that I was coaching. And I didn't just say he came and sat in the chair. I said he was draped in the chair, picking the quick of his nail beds and the stale smell of dank mold. And there was deafening silence. And this coaching session wasn't going to go well.
Yes, that evokes a whole lot of thought in oneself and brings it to life as an image.
Indeed, indeed. And so as much of that, we call it vivification. So as much as you can bring that sensory language and imagine what it will be like for people when they're doing this, when they're seeing it, when they're experiencing it, when it's real for them, and they can choose, am I up for this or not?
Karen, what are your top tips for a leader to feel confident in using stories to move their organizations?
I think the stories need to be simple, full of vivid sensory detail and real and authentic and flowing through the leader. And what helps with this is for a leader to think of a time when they had the feelings that they want to evoke in their people, and for them really to notice what was going on and how might that connect to where I want to take my organization, and how can it have meaning for those who are listening to me. To be able to describe what it's going to be like for others, that they'll be caring, there'll be a buzz, people will be curious, they'll be sharing their ideas, there'll be energy, and this is worthwhile. And to remember the point that I made earlier, acknowledge the past, help people make sense of what's going on now, and excite them about the future they're going to share with you together. And in that way, you inspire your people and they can inspire your customers and your clients and give the best possible service and attention to colleagues and the wider world.
Oh, that's great, Karen. Thank you so much. So that's all for today's episode of Leadership Comes Alive. I'd like to thank Karen Dean for being with us today, and thank you all for listening. This is Danielle Grant from Leadershape Global.